Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We'll start as usual. Bring our mind to the prayers, invocation, praise to Manjushri. We do that in Tibet English first, and then we do the refuge and four immeasurables on page 9 and 10. I pay homage to Guru and our Lord Arya Manjushri. Intelligence shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the true obscuration. You hold the scripture text in your heart, symbolic of the seeing of all things as they are. Those who are caught in the prison of samsara are confused in the darkness of ignorance and are overwhelmed by their suffering. In 60 ways with your speech you teach migratory beings to whom you have compassion as your only child. Your proclamation of Dharma is like a roaring thunder, which awakens beings from the stupor of delusions and frees us from the giant chains of our karma. You wield a sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. Primordially pure, your princely body is the embodiment of the perfection of a bodhisattva dwelling on the 10th bhumi. I pay homage to Manjushri, who dispelled my ignorance, as his body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illumine the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and texts that explain them. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of listening to these teachings, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. Semje danje dewa dande juda dambara juje dunga da dunga je juda dambara juje dunga mebe dewa da mera juje yere jada nyeda drave tanyala nebara juje. May all living beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from suffering and cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separate from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings not be separate from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings leave attachment and hatred towards near ones afar by living with equanimity. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings leave attachment and hatred towards near ones afar by living with equanimity. Zemje namje zambada loye jera jedawa jejo do mo de bae In accordance with the disposition and intelligence of sentient beings, we request to return the Dharma well of greater, lesser, and common vehicles. So welcome back to our class. During this, we're looking at the analytically how to meditate, not just when we're sitting, but always using our analytical or logical, sensible, rational mind to put to use when we do whatever that we think is good, such as, say in tonight's is the SHANTI Paramita, which is tolerance. Often we practice tolerance with the wrong reasons, not understanding, not analytically, not insightfully seeing the virtue and benefit for both oneself and others. Often we practice tolerance with how the transcendental tolerance. We practice tolerance to preserve ego. Even if we do practice tolerance, we pretend as we are more pious than the other. And even if we do practice tolerance, we later on show some kind of a wariness. So the tolerance itself, with how the transcendental wisdom, that's why SHANTI PARAMITA. SHANTI means really, actually means pacification, which means the rage or inner rage or anger or resentment has to be pacified. It's the word SHANTI. The first syllable sha is to means pacify, like calm abiding or shamatha, calm abiding. It's calming our inner noise or voice or rage, which we often pay heed to, and then we get enraged, and then we outwardly express some kind of aggression. So the pacification, analytically conscious ability to pacify one's own inner aggression is more important than thinking that one is the subject or object of other people's aggression. People usually try to calm other people's aggression, but by their own aggression. Aggression is not overcome by aggression. So one may feel we've been attacked, but if our own response isn't going to make it better, unless we can practice SHANTI Paramita. SHANTI Paramita, Tibetan means forbearance, the Zopa, word Zopa. Zopa means bearing the hardships there is in putting up with hardships. But word for is for a greater purpose, for higher purposes, for altruistic purposes. So therefore, the English word forbearance I prefer than the tolerance. But I think if it's explained, we can understand tolerance. But forbearance probably is a little bit more richer in that sense. So what is the nature of tolerance? Nature of forbearance is whatever hardships that we encounter, either with nature, such heat or cold or whatever, when we try to do something, whether it's work, helping others, or doing things for ourselves. So bearing hardships, physical hardships caused by nature, as well as bearing hardships that are emotionally difficult to put up with. We put up with those things. And so nature of forbearance is that overcoming the difficulties and seeing the purpose and benefit of forbearing the hardships now in order to allay the future sufferings for a greater cause for oneself and others as well as the future. So nature of tolerance is, and therefore very, very far-sighted vision and insight, which sees the virtue of forbearance than of the childish reaction there is. What is nature of tolerance is the one who practices forbearance usually is a very peaceful person. He does not talk about what other people did wrong to him. He minds his own mental reaction towards that. He's more occupied in pacifying his inner rage rather than the things outside. So waste no time in conquering the illusory enemy out there. One is one's own, the inner uprising is happening. Internally we are more disturbed by our own emotion, negativity, than others. So one who therefore calms his own inner aggression or resentment more than, so therefore a person whose tolerance is very happy. It doesn't have even his difficulties have very short-lived effect on him. His endurance to maintain good qualities are guaranteed. Yeah, good things last long, and he or she is able to maintain that. And he faces hardships easily for higher purposes. He doesn't complain very much. He sees good even in the hardships. And the hardships he sees is exhausting of his own past doing. He doesn't see the other things as a trigger, as the primary cause of it. So it's very insightful, wise, and therefore very, very profound quality. Even the qualities of Buddhas that we bow down to came from practicing forbearance. He sat under the tree, whether it's cold, hot, dry, wet, he complained not. Not because they weren't hot or cold, because there was necessary for him to do that. So therefore, one who has that kind of vision, we have lots of people who do that kind of thing in community and social work. Lots of people do a lot of laborious work, but they should, or they maybe are doing with such purposes. When the purpose is great, some people are tolerant, but deep down they're seething. Deep down they're resenting. So that is not paramita. That's miserable shanti. That piece is only on the temporary, on the very thin ice, but inside all water. It will collapse in no time. So one must practice. One therefore must have the paramita. Paramita is the transcendental wisdom in practicing this. That's yeah. So the opposite, the demerit of forbearance, is that person who has no skill to practice forbearance, doesn't get on with anyone very long, and doesn't even get along with themselves. and because of that, they are never at peace with themselves, and they're very negative, they're very critical, they're always physically very susceptible to contract illnesses, and emotionally very disturbed, and perceptually very blurred and not clear reading. They see wrong things, so their senses become very much affected, very much, very obscured, It just obscures our judgment. When we are angry, when we're intolerant, we can see sort of E like F or B like D or something like that. You don't see and hear things properly because your all senses are disturbed, and the person doesn't sleep well. And he might abuse food, he might abuse all sorts of things that are harmful to him or her, but he doesn't know that. So his health deteriorates, his emotional well-being not there, and as a result of that, his relationship with people, particularly the nearest and dearest, they are not. There are always differences between people to part, but they don't have to be vindictive and enmity. But people who don't practice tolerance, they do. They're so angry over such a small issue. They stay seething and resentful for days, weeks, even years. And that is hell on life, hell on earth. You don't need to go in hell. They say the hell is made out of hatred. It's not a place down there. It's in the mind of hate. The hell is born. So who needs that? Demerit of intolerance, demerit of lack of tolerance, we must understand. That's the truth of origin we're talking about. Truth of origin of suffering is intolerance, resentment, anger, and so forth. So that's the truth of origin. And So if we neither understand the origin of suffering, like anger and resentment, then we know where our suffering comes from. We wouldn't blame on other people, because that's the true origin is our own anger, not what people did. What people did is only a trigger. That's just a little wind, But our own vulnerability is the one that makes ourselves. So what people do is only circumstances. The actual cause is our own seething anger. And so that's why the second one, demerit of intolerance, is the truth of origin of suffering, of aggression and hate, resentment and anger, is that. And then physically stressful, emotionally uncluttered, and very unreliable thoughts and perceptions and opinions, and judged and enforced by that. So therefore, here now we're going to talk about the main subject, which is the tolerance or forbearance. And here there are three types, three classification. Three classification means three stages. Classification or variety doesn't mean one or the other, not like that. One should practice these three types of tolerance in stages. First, what's called tolerance of not being swayed by harm. So that is the forbearance. Firstly, by prevention of intolerance to the obstacle of happiness. So you realize if you're intolerant, intolerance is the cause of unhappiness. So practicing tolerance, why you don't sway by harm by others, harm whatever be, look like is so that you try to prevent the long-term obstacle to happiness is our intolerance. Long-term cause of unhappiness is intolerance. So therefore, when there are need to practice tolerance, we are not swayed by the harm. We are stabilized by the harm. We become even more steadier by a slightest harm. Reason for that is improper to be angry. So one should know, firstly, it's improper to be angry because somebody who's doing what they're doing is usually deluded. They are stressed, they're suffering, they're in huge difficulties. So therefore, to be angry at them would be just like doing more harm than harm. So why we have to be not improper to be angry? Because of the improper due to lack of freedom. Improper due to lack of freedom, and they have no freedom. They don't know. They are just like under some influence of drug. They are under the influence of bad habits. They are under the influence of their bad environment. And so they have no freedom. They're just acting out their own unreliable emotions, thinking it is informing them something good to do, but they don't realize how destructive and how unreliable that it is. So because of that, the person, whether it's your friend or your stranger or someone you really think you don't really want to get along well with somebody, it's largely because they are not themselves. They are influenced by this terrible thing called affliction. They have no freedom to be kind or speak kindly because of their bad upbringing or because of their own karmic habits. They never got to correct them. Improper due to adventitiousness. Improper means what they made use to what they said that did you harm you, or it's just adventitious. It's all finished. So what are you angry again? If they said something, it's finished. If they did something, it's finished. It's not lingering. So adventitious. Adventitious meaning temporal. It's very transient. It's like wind that blew if I'm wearing this like this, like here, if the wind just blew this, and then it's not blowing all the time, it just blew once and then that's it. So what are you talking about? You want to go after the wind, So adventitious means temporary, yeah? What they said is finished, improper due to adventitiousness of the thing. It is no longer there, so now only you are about to repeat it. So that would be very foolish. So why you stay unswayed? Because it is only temporary. It's only for today. It's only during these 2 hours I have to put up. After that, what's the point of me reacting to sow a seed of ill will? And that is very insightful, isn't it? Very, very insightful. And improper due to direct and indirect.
Meaning this improper means that what person do is, he's not knowing directly, he's not doing this directly to harm you. There's some indirect. Maybe he's angry with his dad. Therefore, anybody with authority, he'll react like that. So it's usually like that. They have been rebellious to Ben, and they're rebellious to anybody. So therefore, it's unresolved issues of the past, venting, bottled up so long, and they try to vent it out wherever the opportunity arises. So it's actually nothing to do probably with us. It's all about his own undealt issue. See, if you have this knowledge, see, we don't stand in the way of their emotions. Yeah. So this is called why you're not swayable, why you're not disturbable. The practice of tolerance, you've got to have analytical mind, isn't it? Analytically reason why you practice tolerance. Not because you should be tolerant because otherwise you look bad on you type of thing. That's a really poor reason to be practice tolerant. There's no wisdom, no kindness in that. Self-preservation. The self-preservation shouldn't be the intent. Its purpose should be, understanding. This person is maybe have a really difficult day or difficult month or difficult week, and therefore he never can work with someone who has authority, or whatever, all this other gender, Some people like that, have this kind of locked in this fundamental problem, and they don't know how to go beyond that. And we just happen to be anybody. Anybody will do for them to get lashed out like that. So nothing to do with me. I just have to be tolerant. So analytical, yeah? You can see your mind thinking a little bit more reasonably and intelligibly, isn't it? Then there's a lot of fitness in practicing tolerance. It's not a desperate act. It's not a sort of, you wish it's going to go over as soon as possible type of thing, More the merrier, so to speak. With some breathing space every now and then. Quickly disappear, People who practice this, they're usually intelligent. If something is heating up, they say, "Excuse me, can I go to the toilet?" It's very good. Just excuse yourself out of a situation for a few minutes and come back. And that has given them to be calm, and you also realize things are not quite the same, You can interrupt with a good reason. "Excuse me, do you want a cup of tea?" When somebody's going on and on. "Can I get back to you about that later on?" Not swayed, but steady, made you steadier. Improper due to instigation. Yeah. So improper due to instigation means if we are going to be act out and react to them just because they instigate, that's even more improper, isn't it? We're so swayable, we're so vulnerable. The smallest thing, they say, "You press my wrong button," they go, "Yeah, why you have the wrong button in the first place?" That's the whole thing. Deactivate the wrong buttons. So why we're so vulnerable? Why we're so instigatable? Because, if we practice tolerance, not being swayed by harm, you got to have an analytical. You have to have reasonable mind that intelligibly argues for you and for them, not just argue for you and against them. That's not argument. Argue for both sake, benefit of both. This is altruism, has to be altruistically done. I must practice tolerance so that his little instigation does not become flared up by my poor reaction. If I didn't react, even he instigate like that, it's got no harm on itself. They say you need two hands to clap. Yeah, the other hand come like this but never clap. Because you didn't put your hands up. That is the tolerance. You have to use the intelligence out of altruistic motivation and purpose. Then you are wakeful. You're really happy that you are there and then doing just that. They say you are actually dharmaing. You are doing the practice of dharma in that, not in a chanting form, not in a devotional form, but devoted to practice tolerance. Even much better than bowing down to the 1,000 times before the Buddha. Buddha said, just doing the practice is far more meritorious than physically making a lot of offering to the Buddhas. Buddhas don't need any of those offerings. Buddha needs sentient beings to be kind to each other. So that's why we should not be swayed by instigation, but stabilized by instigation. Therefore, it's improper, it's insensible, illogical, irrational to be disturbed by these. So that's a good reason to be unagitated. So that's what we call tolerance of not being swayed by harm. And then, so that's all object. All object. I mean, you look at the person and their situation. Very pitiful. Looks awful to be what, and it's their object of compassion and pity, and largely our karma as well. They're not just entirely of their doing. They're also some kind of instigated by our own karmic situations. So I have to have compassion to them. Then the next is the subject. Subject is about what is actually the point? What is actually the point we're talking about? Not that issue. Usually when people are impatient, they forget the issue. They forget that they totally ignore the main issue. They get completely sidetracked, distracted, and then miss the whole point. When you are transcendentally practicing Shanti Paramita, you're using intelligence. What is the issue here? What does he want? Maybe I can do it. Why talk about where he said and how he said or whatever? Just do that. Why waste 2 hours when you could have solved the thing in 10 minutes? Just do that. So, intelligible, paramita, transcendental, it's called, transcends problems. It's cut through the long time it usually takes. And sometimes our mind isn't so penetrative or so sharp to do that. We just go and windy and just all over the many squares and many circles, and finally realize. So, improper. So the subject, we always think of subject. Subject, when you think of the subject, it's not the people you attack. Make sure the subject about which you and their care are guarded. So no point defeating and attacking people. If the purpose or objective is in jeopardy, then you try to guard that. Be that for them or be that for you. So if you do that, then impatience has no role in fixing that. Impatience cannot fix that. Only with a forbearing mind that has reason to do that can then not forget what the main issue here. So the main thing is to get well. The person looks like they are very unwell, not with themselves. And we are about to jump into that. And then neither of us will be useful to each other. And so how can we not let that happen? That is the subject for the plight and benefit of sentient beings, for now and future, for purification of both persons' karma and difficult situations, to delight the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, to fulfill one's promise and wishes, and to repay the kindness of those to whom we have not practiced patience, in order to purify our own anger. So with that in mind, you remember the subject. And improper support means the support means people who are angry or are making each other angry, aggressive to each other by using harmful language or whatever they do. They don't have the support. They have very improper support. One who's angry his reasons are all over the place, not proven by supportive fact. So don't tell him that, because he's already don't know that. So don't tell him that. Just in your back of mind, he's not supported by very well. So you reason, you try to explain, you try to clarify. It doesn't clarify a lot. When main thing it clarifies, you just control your nerves. Otherwise, you too will be having no proper support. So in order to lay a hand, help somebody to get up, you got to be pretty standing firm somewhere, isn't it? So therefore, they are already improper support. Their reasoning, their story is all over the place, and not a lot of facts there that's going to benefit to them. Therefore, you see the vulnerability, the pitifulness, the awfulness, the objects of compassion. If somebody's acting like, usually you will lend out compassion. That's exactly the case. So therefore, it's improper. They are, improper. They don't have. So examine the cause of the harm. What is the cause of the harm? What are they really talking about? They're not focusing the issue at all. So that shows that how improperly supported they are. They have nothing to stand on. Now, are we going to add fire on that? Are we going to add fuel to the burning fire? We too will be doing that. So these are amazing logical reasons. We're going to assist them and assist us automatically. Sometimes, of course, we think when we want to practice patience, but no, I'm not going to do this. This is going to spoil him. This is going to make him do this many more times. And, we just always think like that, as we can fix the whole world by our tolerance. If that's the case, if Buddha practiced perfection of SHANTI PARAMITA a long time, the world should be perfect. Isn't it? Each individual mind stream has to be proved with anger. It's not the whole world can be covered by some tarpaulin and protect everybody from getting hurt. So even Buddha's perfection of tolerance is only an object of our admiration and rejoice, but it didn't stop all the intolerance in the world. So therefore, do not think that if I don't practice tolerance, this kind of person will flourish. Yeah, lots of people's reasons very good. Motivation is pretty good. They want to stop the whole world. In the meantime, it's our own world we got to secure. But we people try to secure the whole world. This is why the Shanti Deva lamented. So instead of trying to cover the whole world with the leather, to protect my feet from being hurt by thorns or pebbles, if I were just put a tiny piece of leather that covers my feet, then wherever I go, I'm covered. Likewise, instead of conquer all the enemies out there, or correct all the people out there, I must, prove my mind of hate. So that is really what we're talking about. Examining one's promise, that's very good. The other person may not have promised to practice bodhicitta. Maybe they did have bodhicitta, but they forgot. See, it's elapsing already. We want to join that. We may have vowed to practice love and kindness. As a prayer we do. As a bodhicitta, that's what it is. And here, one's promise. If I respond to this, use these words, join this way, or speak this way, am I? If we think they have broken bodhicitta vows, does that justify us to break ours? So therefore, examining one's own promise. And that's very powerful. See, these are analytical mind. These are all very, very rational, logical, and very, very reliable. That's called Dharma. That's called Dharma. Dharma is self-reliance. Buddha said, don't rely on people, rely on Dharma. So, what is that? You are doing of it. You are realizing of it. You are realizing the Dharma and upness of practicing that one. There in, they call application. You've got to download the right application, my dear. And use those applications for the purpose you have downloaded, even if they were free. People are downloading all these applications and they're not using them. So mere downloading is called scriptural dharma. Scriptural dharma does not actually give refuge people. It is not the medicine. Having the prescription of the doctor doesn't cure you. Follow the prescription, take the medicine, avoid the walking in the cold or whatever, and then you get well. Likewise, no point downloading the prescription if you don't use it. But when you're practicing tolerance with these reasonings, then you are dharmaing. You are actually putting dharma in action. Wow, that's what the Sangha is so beautiful. And those who are a member of the Sangha, you can see they're changing. You can see they were really, really tamed by the Dharma. It's like they have been unarmed of hate. They have vowed to practice kindness. And there you can see they're changing their verbal habits, their emotional reactions. Even they are treated with harm. It doesn't mean that you're a tolerant person, you will never be harmed by people. How do you know your tolerance is registering if you don't get harmed? If you don't expose to harm, you can never tell you're tolerant, isn't it? So the more opportunity that you expose yourself to some harm and difficulty, that much we get opportunity to employ our application. And you will not only use the application, but update them regularly. Go through the 3 stages of the tolerance, not just the first one, not just unswayed. And then you see, proper to love. Then you say, improper to be angry, but this is the actual time to practice love and kindness. This is the very person I must practice kindness. This person suffers from karma and affliction and all the collection of difficulties. If I don't practice this with this, who am I going to practice? I'm going to practice tolerance with Prince Charles or with Desmond Tutu? What are you talking about? Where is your tolerance applicable? When it's going to be a currency that has some use. So people want to be tolerant, but not with this person, not with this situation. They want to keep the tolerance somewhere else, maybe next year, maybe some other beautiful day or something. No, to practice tolerance practice is very awkward and unexpected places and people and situations. It's so important. And they usually are our loved ones. Usually are they who do so much for us, did so much to us. And we may have some differences in recent months, years, but they act so still. We have a lot of things we can be kind towards each other. When you remember that, then you see see the reason why you practice tolerance. You're not swayed by the harm by they're doing. You can see some mothers do that. Even the kids does so many things. Still, she's tolerant. She's so giving, so kind, because she loves the child more than agitated by their wrongdoings. Even the agitation they have is because they love. If they don't love, they can just walk off. They didn't. They put up with all the hardships. So it's very important to understand. These are analytical. These make your brain become very plasticity. They talk about neuroplasticity. If you're thinking like that, I'm sure the brains will, train itself to become new. You can reform yourself. What they're talking about the plasticity, there's some reformation. There's some kind of information that is helping them to reform their attitudes and dropping some wrong views and adopting new ones. That's why they're neural activities. If one is not adopting any new changes or dropping any wrong views, they will be plastic. There's no plasticity, It looks like tofu. Looks like tofu, Doesn't look like there's any wire down there. Now, when you're starting to reason like this, practicing, second is prevention of tolerance to suffering cause. Prevention of tolerance to suffering caused, meaning that when you are not swayed by the harm, because the suffering that has already caused, suffering may have caused, pain may have already caused, and if you prevent tolerance, and then you are swayed, you're swayed. But if you instead of the tolerance being prevented, but tolerance is the suffering has already caused, and then if you practice tolerance, if you practice forbearance, then that prevention of tolerance, meaning that future suffering that will be caused, similar suffering, will not causing again the similar sufferings. You have been there, done that. You have been there, and next time it will not cause. It's like you've been hit like that many times, and it doesn't matter. you come through very strong. Prevention and tolerance to obstacles of respect. Yeah, that this is like prevention of intolerance, meaning try to prevent yourself becoming intolerant to obstacles of respect. That some people are out of those who cause you suffering, therefore you have to practice forbearance. Others are because they are your objects of respect, maybe parent or senior or someone you have very, very important in your life, and you have some degree of respect. So your respectful friend, respect between the two, will be jeopardized if we are intolerant. So therefore, the intolerance should be prevented. Prevention of unhappiness of harmer success. This is if some people we are aggressive to become good, become successful, and then we become unhappy. So that's usually the case. People actually wish somebody went through that. They even celebrate when something bad happens and that. So that's when you're really angry. You must be really, really resentful if you're doing that. If someone you don't like have something good happening, then you really feel, tolerant or something. You feel happy or something. Prevention of unhappiness. So we should not be. We should not be thinking like that, And prevention of happiness of harmer's downfall. If people feel happy because somebody goes down, or unhappy when they go up, so that shows that how much swayable intolerance we have or not. But when you have people who harm you, or you have some difficulty liking them, is successful, that you don't become unhappy because they're successful. Exactly opposite. Yeah, if they are going through downfall, they're going through really going down with many difficulties, then you shouldn't be happy either. You should prevent that. These are the examples of the first our stage of forbearance, tolerance. So this means that we have to have a lot of logical, rational thinking mind that actually sees why we do and what we do. We don't do it just because it's a paramita. We don't do it because it was said so, but we got to have reasons, tips, and realizations, and realizations why we do these things. Why it's mutually, socially, individually, emotionally, and intellectually, it's much more better for us than to them, as well as everybody. With such kind of insight, practicing tolerance, then you will not suffer from resentment. Lots of people practice tolerance, but they practice with the wrong reasoning, and then they become resentful in the long term. So therefore, the tolerance has become cause of mutual entrapment, resentment. But if you practice tolerance with this understanding, instead of becoming cause of resentment, become cause of gratitude. Through that hardship, through these difficulties, you actually see those people or circumstances as great teachers, great places. They wake you up, makes us to grow. Some people say they are harmed. They harmed me, but bodhisattvas don't see anybody who harmed them. They see themselves as the self-harmer, more likely. The other people, whatever they're doing, they create opportunity. They're like giving you an examination, whether they're giving you an opportunity to grow. If you knew that, how do we know they are not bodhisattvas disguised as like that to come to teach us? So there are so many bodhisattvas, amazing, everywhere bodhisattvas. It's amazing. They do the dirty work, you know. Lots of bodhisattvas do that, you know. Remember in one of the sessions we had, bodhisattvas do things that other people wouldn't even think of changing. They do it, and then everybody will throw stones at the bodhisattvas. Then everybody realizes, oh, I do that too. Oh, I do that too. Oh, gosh, I didn't realize. Because everybody's good at hiding. The bodhisattva deliberately makes sure that it's actually known, you know. And so then everybody realized, oh, there's someone in me that's doing that, but hiding as I don't do that. So bodhisattva deliberately do things like that to wake others up. Yeah?
How do you be tolerant of people doing harm to other people, or people doing harm to other sentient beings?
Yeah, this principle is the same. If you can minimize harm,
It makes me feel angry.
makes us feel angry.
Makes us feel angry and intolerant of those
That's
things.
right. But we should, instead of being angry, we have to reason why we are angry. If we haven't reasoned at all, it's not a reasonable thing to be angry. Because if we haven't reasoned at all when you're angry, that's the whole thing about it. We haven't used our intelligence when we're angry, because it gets you nowhere. People take some actions by angry. They think anger makes you to do, fix the problem. Take action, they call it. Sometimes it looks like it did fix the problem temporarily on the surface. maybe they're able to cover leather in the lounge. And then they say, wow, I told you I want to cover the whole world with leather. I already covered the lounge. And then they realize they got no leather. So lots of people have this various feeling that their anger is justified, and they can do something that'll fix it. And it might even look like it fixed on the surface. This is very tempting. This is the whole thing. So when we know this, the reason is same, that we have to reason why it's improper to angry, even at the other people suffering. If it is good reason for you to take some action that's going to stop the problem from the root, you will. That's exactly the Buddha did. That's what this teaching is all about. That's what you do. In being angry, we do 4 things well. We close our eyes and open our mouth and tighten our fist, and then have verbal diarrhea. so it messes everywhere, you know. So that's what angry person do, you know. So you have to see why it's improper. So therefore we should love, we should show kind. How can we support these people? You know, this is why education is so important. Dharma is so important. If more people understand Dharma, then they understand, this is how best we can give this Dharma. We can put them in jail, we can punish them, it's just a civil measure for society have to do that, like they got law and order. Actually, law and disorder. It actually creates more problems. But of course you can't do that in a kind of convention where you have to have some kind of convention by which you expect each other to be a little bit more responsible for each other. But individual growth, spiritual point of view, it's a very logical, very challenging. Bodhisattva practice is very challenging to the ego, you know. So it's very different. So that's that. We will. Time will not tolerate us to just talk about that. But so we pretend that we are covering these 1 paramita each night, okay? at least intellectually, or at least my preparation point of view, you know. I had great fun preparing this, you know. It's not 2 hours I'm preparing. I'm reading quite 4 or 5 days before I get to write these notes. So I'm what you call milking cows all the time. You're just having a little bit of the cream. You don't realize how much milk I've been drinking. Drinking and soothing myself, yeah. And then next one is tolerance of voluntary acceptance of suffering. Now, previously when we were practicing tolerance, we weren't practicing the sufferings that come, pain and difficulties, bearing the difficulties is not so voluntarily. Oh, do I have to do this? Oh, I suppose so. Oh, do they have to do this again? Oh, yes, maybe, yeah, I might as well. So there is not a lot of voluntarily accepting suffering, you know. There's sort of almost trying to find a strength that you don't have in accepting suffering, but hopefully it will go over in 2 hours' time, type of thing. Now, this tolerance of voluntary acceptance of suffering is amazing. The reason to accept suffering voluntarily. Why? Why should you accept suffering voluntarily? Because life is nothing but suffering. So you might as well perfect it. You might as well perfect the suffering. They call more the merrier. Because you are suffering anyway, it's like you go into the tips, you might as well take the neighbor's garbage. It's just like that. So, because the reason is that if you can, it might even be your karma. It might even be your karma. So therefore, the most sentient beings are completely unsupported by teachings like this. They haven't understood, they haven't realized. And so they are not fit to do the things that we think they should do. They just don't even have heard the teachings of virtue of tolerance. They have heard the word zero tolerance. Yeah, that's right. Zero tolerance. They are discouraged from practicing tolerance for whatever reasons, you know. Reason to accept suffering voluntarily. Why? Because there's so few who do it. Someone got to do it. You don't say, there's so many people who practice intolerance, I don't have to do. So, you know, there's so few practice tolerance. You know, they all wish to do it, but they actually, when it comes to do, so few people do. Someone's got to put the start, a kick in. Someone got to do the good kick start of this virtue of tolerance happening. If you see someone tolerant, I bet you that will inspire you more than the teachings. Teaching is very inspiring, but somebody really, you really saw somebody tolerant, they've really been harmed, whatever. They're not saying anything, they're not retaliating, they're not doing anything harmful back. Then you see real Dharma in action. That is why reason to accept suffering voluntarily, because it's firstly soothing to the karma and difficulties of themselves, and also it purifies the karma of the other. So therefore it's a very meaningful undertaking. So if it's so important to voluntarily accept suffering and the reasons are good, what is the method? The method to cultivate these first is rejection of aversion to suffering. Why? Aversion to suffering is cause of suffering. So therefore the whole Buddhist idea of not swayed by suffering has to be the way. We should expect suffering. And if there is no suffering, something must be wrong. Usually people have no suffering, physical level, temporal level, you know. But emotional level, you know, cognitive level, they have sufferings, you know. They may not have suffering, but they have suffering of all conditional existence. Grasping to me. That's suffering. They don't realize they're making them. Very subtle sufferings. So therefore, one should reject the aversion to suffering, because aversion is cause of suffering, and aversion is self-caused by ignorance. And so this makes you to understand appropriateness of accepting suffering. So that's why suffering must be accepted. It's because life is suffering, that suffering has to be accepted, or there are more appropriate, more logical reasons that suffering must be accepted. There's some use and benefit and merit in accepting suffering. What are they? Virtue of suffering. The virtue of suffering, first is, suffering induces renunciation. Renunciation meaning get rid of, you know. it get rid of the very cause of suffering, such as hate. It help us to recognize the true origin of suffering. True origin of suffering. When we accept the suffering, we are actually able to understand the cause of the suffering, true origin of suffering. So the more we accept the suffering, that much it induces our renunciation. Renunciation is definite realization. What is suffering and what is cause thereof. You don't misrecognize non-cause as a cause and not recognize the cause as a cause. So that is, by learning about suffering, we develop renunciation. We do not develop anger to somebody because the anger creates more suffering. So therefore, it helps us to renounce the very suffering and its causes. Meaning, renunciation means liberation. Suffering induces liberation from suffering. Because you cannot get it, malaria, the anti-malarian medicine was developed by understanding malaria, isn't it? So where there is no education or technology, they still suffer from malaria. But those of us who live in countries, we are now renounced from suffering of malaria because how many people died in the last 200 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever to malaria. As a result of that, we now know how to reject the total cause of malaria. Like that, suffering induces renunciation. It doesn't make us to want the very thing that is cause of suffering. It makes us to know, that is the cause of the problem. I'm still jumping on it. I'm still looking for it. I'm still hunting the very thing. It's the real cause of suffering. Why should I want that? You see? Suffering reduces pride. This is very good. Not only suffering helps you develop renunciation, but it reduces pride. Because people practitioners think that they shouldn't have any problems. The practitioner needs sufferings so that their pride of doing some practices do not make them to bloat the ego. So suffering reduces the pride. And we don't think we are extraordinary, we are genius. And so the suffering reduces the pride and arrogance. And also makes people to understand humanity. He's a human too. If we have no pride, we'll understand those with suffering. Otherwise, we'll mistreat them, look down upon them. Even he do that. Can you believe it, Dharti? As we have the same kind of realist expectation that some people are above pride, above afflictions. We don't. Suffering reduces our own pride and therefore judgment of others, judgment to others, prejudice to others, and competitiveness to others, and disrespectful to others, or belittling others. All these things are cause of pride. Even if we have many merits in us, but if we have pride, it is cause of suffering. So, suffering discourages non-virtuous deeds. When the person actually experienced suffering, he realized suffering came from certain actions. And usually it's a non-virtuous action. And then that action makes them to suffer, and then they are like, now I can see what is this is effect of. Now they can recognize their own action is a direct cause of the effect that they were not liking to accept. This is true dharma, taking responsibility. Until then, people were always trying to implicate somebody. He did this to me. They did this to me. Always trying to point the finger at something. And that's not virtue. That's non-virtue. Blaming is non-virtue. Implicating somebody is non-virtue. Criticizing about other people is non-virtue. So therefore, a person who actually experiences his suffering and practices tolerance with that, then that discourages him from reacting non-virtuously, overreacting non-virtuously. See, that's the reason why the appropriateness of accepting suffering. Knowing the lack of suffering is merit. Also, knowing the suffering itself it lack inherent existence. Suffering itself doesn't exist from its own side. Suffering is created by our own inaptitude. Suffering is self-cause, self-harm. It's not some imported goods, Suffering is homemade. So it's good to know that, And then when we know that suffering is homemade, therefore we can unmake it. Oh, let's not make it. Okay, thank you. Let's not make it. See, then one knows there is no suffering called suffering that exists from its own side. It lacks inherent existence. There is no suffering called person or thing. Suffering is a kind of mentality. Mentality is impermanent. You can see your attitude, your mind shifting and moving from one to other. One moment you think you're friends with them, other moment you're this. It's so mentality, so unreliable mentality. So suffering is unreliable mentality. So why you have to worry so much of unreliable mentality? Why you want to? So it's a merit to know it's unreliable. Why you wanted to rely on something that's unreliable? So therefore, suffering lacked any inherent existence. It is just misunderstanding that it is some curse, or it's a Mara, or it's some kind of like Satan's work, or some kind of that kind of wrong view. The other people's doing, that is suffering. No. If you really look at the suffering, there isn't one. Suffering is a kind of a very unclear, obscured mentality. It's like unhygienic thinking. Suffering is unhygienic thinking. If you keep the mind hygienic, there's no suffering. You couldn't see any growth. You couldn't see any bacteria growing because you kept the place clean. Suffering is a condition. Conditioned by a number of factors. It isn't a thing in itself. That's why suffering is tolerable. Suffering is acceptable because the moment you accept, it's gone. The more you push, that much more it grows. So when you know how to accept it, suffering became tolerance, a virtue. So once suffering evokes compassion for others, we are armed with Dharma. We have refuge. We understand Dharma. Our eyes were open. Our hands will give it tools. Now, if we are practicing tolerance, forbearance with compassion, then it evokes compassion to the others who are not able to be that we like them to be. Does that justify us to take action that is going to be put them down or hit them or punish them or criticize them? That's not compassionate. So who do you practice compassion to? Those who are tolerant? Those who are virtuous? No. Through them you practice respect, I suppose. But actual compassion you practice to sentient beings who are unruly, who are not with themselves. So therefore, our best response is to practice tolerance. So therefore, it's appropriate to accept suffering there is in practicing tolerance. You can't practice tolerance unless you are able to accept some share of the pain that goes with the undertaking. So these are all logical reasonings. These are analytical mind, isn't it? We need to be thinking like this there and then in situations. And then you can see I'm making of a true person. They call growth. People say life coach. Yeah, Dharma is life coach. And nobody can coach you. If we are thinking and remembering these and then employing them, that is the coach. That will teach you where not to go, where to stand a little bit, and where to move thereafter. It'll teach you. Your mind is so intelligible. It is full of information that is correct now. Previously, all the information is wrong, misunderstanding, incomplete. Now the information is correct and very liberatingly reliable, and amazingly, it makes you feel fit. It makes you fit and meritorious to practice that. So, virtue of suffering. Why Buddhism uses the word suffering in every page?
suffering, sentient being. They don't have the word God, hell. They don't have that. Suffering and sentient beings. Suffering and sentient beings. Everywhere, almost every couple of lines, you will see sentient being or suffering. All these things. Why? Because these are so pertinent. Virtue of suffering. Buddha said, truth of suffering. He didn't say the curse of suffering. Buddhism, we don't talk about what's the truth. What is the actual truth? We talk about truth of suffering. We don't talk about truth in believing in certainty, permanence, fixations. No belief in fixation and certainty. That's not Buddhism. Truth in Buddhism is truth of suffering. If somebody is going through suffering, show kindness to them. Then you understand the truth. If you judge them, if you punish them, if you overreact to them, that's not truth of suffering. That's the false. Truth of suffering means that is the fact of life. Don't deny that. And when we understand that, then you see the appropriateness of accepting suffering voluntarily. And not only that, then penance is a virtue. The penance meaning bearing the hardship. Bearing the hardship there is in the practice of tolerance or forbearance is a virtue. It is a virtue to practice forbearance. Meaningfulness of liberation. You will feel liberated when you practice forbearance. You feel liberated from the fang of your own hate and ill will, which has bitten you many times. Now you can lift the jaw and let yourself free. You will never self-bite, because it will liberate you from the yoke of hate. You'll be free from the shackle of chain of karma, of reactions. That's the meaning of meaningfulness of liberation from habits, from bad attitudes, and one will be liberated. And if as we become liberated from our hate and our past negative habits, then now we are fit to practice compassion. Previously we couldn't practice compassion. We're stuck. We could not liberate from ill will and hate. And so therefore, meaningfulness of liberation, when you practice the forbearance, the hardship, the useful hardships. We face hardships for many things, for nothing. Just to have this, just to have that, we do many things. Rise early, stay up late, do back-breaking works. We are so tolerant. It's as if we don't know tolerance. We are very tolerant. We're tolerant to useless things, meaningless activities. When we want materialistic something, or looks, or appearance, and then people rise early. They ride on things. They walk 40 miles. They run, they jog. They're very tolerant to the nature, tolerance to the cold, tolerance to the cost of doing it, tolerance to the gears they buy for it. Yes, it's not that we are not tolerant. Our tolerance is useless tolerance, meaningless tolerance. So the Shanti Devas laments some. If people can be tolerant things such just for earning a living and doing that, why can't I practice tolerance to gain liberation, to lead beings to the citadel of enlightenment? So with this mind, we must therefore practice the hardships and virtue in facing the hardships for a meaningful cause of liberating from karma and affliction and cognitive obscuration. Overcomes numerous sufferings. Overcomes meaning it makes you to understand. And then when you know how to uncause the suffering, you don't have to overcome suffering that you don't create. Because you're not causing sufferings. How many things you have to overcome? So perfect enlightenment is usually you uncause the suffering. You're able to uncause the suffering through your tolerance. They say, Shanti Deva's words, Zapatavu Katub Mer. He says, there is no greater asceticism than forbearance. And
Kontrol tahu dungame, when there's no suffering or hell than that of ill will. Says that, all said in that 2 lines. Because of that, one needs to liberate from the shackle of hate, and therefore bear whatever hardship there is to experience. And it purifies karma. Amazing. When you do forbear the hardships, it purifies all the past intolerance, karma of intolerance, past karma of anger. And you'll be able to forgive other people. You'll be able to apologize next time. You'll be able to pardon others in the future, because previously we don't have a karmic fitness to tolerate something or forgive them or pardon them or apologize. Now it will make our karma change. We quickly able to pardon them. Usually it takes done months. Now we can pardon them quickly, as within the day or within the hours. Isn't that a wonderful shift? Wonderful liberation? It is purify bad karma, and meaning that one is now fit to practice good karma, wholesome karma. Even those who are struggling and doing all, still don't denigrate them. Give them some moral support, give them some help, as you are like that too. And slowly give them companion. Don't feel them there alone, that is bad. Just act as you are just as bad. Then give them the company that otherwise not offered by anybody. That is the good karma. Purify the bad karma, saying that I'm good, they're not. That's not good karma. That's divisive karma. That divides the society. That divides the community. So good karma brings harmony. The one who's sufferer of the karma, of difficulties, is the very domain, very range of our practice of Dharma. Our range of practice Dharma is not Buddha statues. They're just reminders. The actual range of practice of Dharma is sentient beings. And so if we don't practice to purify our own bad karma through tolerance, we can't practice tolerance with Buddha statues. I don't think Buddhas are tolerant. The people blow them, they just let them blow. They move them, they just blow, let them move. See? And slowly but truly, that appropriateness accepting suffering and voluntarily accepting suffering become voluntary, familiar. Now it's familiar. It isn't a kind of chore. It isn't kind of a once in a blue moon you do. It is a daily commitment. It's an hourly commitment. It is momentary commitment. It shouldn't be something you do once a week or once a year or once when you're in a good mood practice. No, it's a practice that you're familiar, like eating. You eat every day. Walking, you walk every day. You wash every day, like you practice tolerance every day. So it isn't kind of an occasional practice. So therefore, power of familiarization. Acceptance of suffering, familiar. You have done that before. You're so familiar. You're so tolerant doing that. Why can't you do that? Yeah, just do that. Use the tolerance that you do for other things just on that purpose, with bodhicitta motivation. Usually only for our own small things we tolerate, and why we won't be tolerant for the beneficial multitude of sentient beings. See, now the mind is thinking, and mind is hearing and getting, It's really getting. And there's some kind of a deep appreciation of the medicineness of the Dharma. And you first, when somebody tells you the benefit, you say, wow, I'll get 1 tablet. Oh, I got 10 tablets. But wait until you take those tablets. Wait until you see the immediate benefit of that. But you got to swallow that. Whether it's oblong or round or pink or whatever shape that you don't look like wanting to eat. See? But you will not mind practicing because of the tolerance. Because of the familiarization of the virtue there is, merit there is, goodness there is, use there is, and fitness that it provides. Because of that, now the confidence in the Dharma is boosted, not by mere blind faith, but the reason. The reason is very powerful. Reason goes to revalidate the faith. If the reason is not possible, the faith will go shaky very quickly. Faith in things or people or things, even to the Dharma, not enough. You've got to have reasoning. You have to reason why you practice tolerance, how you practice, and so on. You're so familiar with that. And they say, everything is familiarity. The more familiar you become, that much easier it gets. So, to do all these three things above, basic explanation to do the tolerance or voluntary acceptance of suffering is, firstly, you think of, these are very important, you think of, here, by respecting the place, I shouldn't be intolerant in this place. Always think of, this is important place. This is my workplace. This is in front of my dad. This is in front of my friend. Never see anywhere that's appropriate to be intolerant. So respect the place. I should mind or contain my emotions. This is not appropriate place. As there was some other appropriate place, You will not find wherever you go is not really appropriate. And worldly concerns, explanation of worldly concerns is that some people practice intolerance so that they will be loved, they will be respected. That's a worldly concern. So that's not a good one, not a good reason. So you're not practicing tolerance because people will respect you, people will love you. That's against self-preservation, so worldly concern. So one should, even, that's not the purpose. Even those friends might say, you foolish thing, again practice tolerance with that fella, you're dominating yourself, they call it. See, worldly concerns. The noble cause is not swayable by worldly cause, worldly concerns. If it has to be done, it has to be done. Not because you will lose your face, not because you will not gain any respect. They think you're weak. You're so stubborn. Yeah, they'll call you're stubborn. You're so weak. You just let people do whatever they like. They may call you that, but so be it. You got to wear that, no problem. Some mud will be there. Some mud will stick on your pants if you really want to do the work. Always try to sit clean and do nothing will be done. So you should be willing to roll up the sleeves and let some mud go to your different parts of the body. And the conduct. And therefore, a person whose tolerance is not minding what other people are doing to you. You've got to mind your own conduct. How I'm responding, how I'm reacting. So am I making it 2 times worse? Am I just containing these? Or am I calming myself? One must be mindful of one's own conduct. One's own conduct. One's own conduct we are letting it do, that is actually agitating us more. But one who is mindful of his own conduct, then he will not be influenced by a bad friend. Then we think, otherwise my friend is so upset, and then you just also react like him. You just also go with them, their delusion, their anger, their judgment, their jealousy, whatever. And we didn't mind. We never knew that we have to watch our conduct, no matter what their conduct is. So therefore practice of voluntary acceptance of suffering means we have to accept suffering. He doesn't, that's his problem. Even in friendship, sometimes we have to differ. So don't support the deluded for the sake of staying friendship, but you actually go with the deluded flocks. But you're daring to be different. Have a conduct that is daring to be different. Then you are a true Sangha member. Otherwise, you can cause unsangha feeling. Because you are so easy to not mind your conduct, but other people's conduct. So that's the very important one, because when you're doing that, we have to mind and contain or transform our own sufferings when we're minding our conduct. Otherwise, we think we are supporting our friend. oh, that's a noble cause, that's a right cause. And we don't realize what that is making us do that we are not even aware. It's our own conduct. That's not going to fix the problem at all. Upholding Dharma, yeah. So if you practice minding your conduct, you are then upholding the Dharma. You're truly holding the Dharma. Otherwise, with that anger, with that judgment, with that resentment, you're going to do everything undharmic, thinking somebody's doing undharmic. And then there is no one left to help to, because we've managed to divide, we managed to suffer or pain, to punish or whatever it is. And rely on alms. Now, relying on alms meaning, like the bhikkhus or monks usually solicit virtue. They're not because monks are not begging because they haven't got anything to eat, but they're actually soliciting other people to practice virtue. So when someone arrives at your door, you got to give something, isn't it? So like that, when you have to practice tolerance, somebody's arriving at your door. So be the alms giver. Give some alms of tolerance. Particularly if somebody is so close in your life, they are misunderstood by everybody, and you are the only one who does that. He expects that from the very inner circle of friends, and most people turn the blind eye to him or whatever. He's begging alms. Now, if you want to have to earn the virtue and merit of giving, you need alms beggar. So, amazing interest, amazing turnaround. The mind is very creative now, thinking like that. It's not giving food only that is alms giving. The real food of thought, that is real alms giving. Real alms giving. Deep interest of spirituality. Yeah, this will make you think and discern very deep down, what is deep interest, not just superficial form, appearance only. Deep down in the core of your heart, dive down deep, and then what is real Dharma, what is real spirituality. Prayers and all that is, of course, form of prayer, form of spirituality. The real spirituality is deep down within one's mind, how to conquer. They say deep into spirituality is purify your mind. Don't do harm to others, even to correct theirs. Do yourself what is good. Purify your mind. That is the Dharma. There's no higher Dharma than that. Many people have been there, done there, thinking they can correct somebody else, and then they themselves become less than adequately good. Every good they have was go through with the baby with the bathwater. And so one who has deep interest in spirituality rather accept that pain or difficulty there is, and then use that to spiritualize oneself. And at the same time, remember, you've got to believe, if you have the bodhicitta, that you are doing this for benefit of others, particularly the person you're practicing tolerance to. It looks like spoiling them on the surface. No. They say, if you practice tolerance with somebody, the connection between you and them has now become noble. If you have only argued with them, then your connection has been dirtied. And if you start practicing tolerance, then all the past connections are now medicined or sanctified. So therefore, your practice of tolerance is beneficial and helping them, helping us. They remember humanity. They have met people who gave them hope for humanity. If they have never been practiced tolerance by somebody at all, then you can see why humanity is losing faith in itself. We need people to do that can enliven the faith and hope in humanity. I believe that your practice of tolerance will benefit others. There's no doubt about the merit of tolerance. It definitely helps other people. Because otherwise, reaction to a vicious cycle. It may look like you're playing the weak one on the surface, but deep down, those who practice tolerance, the problem didn't escalate. You can see the one who practiced tolerance, he managed to de-escalate the problem in a way, that helped everybody. Otherwise, they would have come, everybody reinforcing each other's side. This whole world war was fought on the basis of it's escalation, isn't it? Someone can de-escalate, that would be good, It's called peacemaker. Is go and make and mediate people, so not to do that to each other. Helping others. It's much better than, many things you do. Much better than giving material things. Much better than doing material things, food, clothes, anything. If people practice that, then that really helps. For basic survival. Even us to survive as a human being who have passion for life and die with dignity without thinking he should be dead, even though he's alive. So there's we have reason to be fed and clothed every day. Otherwise, people hesitate sometimes whether they're afraid of today, they're afraid of another month, because they're so intolerant. Those who are tolerant, for them, that is the only thing, good reason to be and living and breathing, so that they can really wait the lift to give some confidence and hope to their fellow people. Very few see much of that in action. No wonder people are so depressed by the lack of those who practice these things. So that's the second. Third practice of tolerance is, third means when you practice, you should practice this sequence, Say somebody did something harmful to you, you're not swayed by that, you're not retaliating them. Okay, that's the first one. Second is, whatever pain and difficulty that came in the practice of tolerance, instead of resenting them, you voluntarily accept them. Yeah? Accept them. Now the third is the definite conviction on the Dharma. Then you're not practicing because of religious reason. You're not practicing so that this will be earn me a place somewhere else, sort of thing. This definite conviction of Dharma means your devotion in the Dharma, triple jump. Out of devotion, the triple. You took refuge in the triple jump. Why did you do that? To say, I'll do this. To practice safety. Refuge means to become safe. Yeah? So, even Dharma, even you recite 100,000 bodhicitta or refuge prayers, so what? Only the mala got shinier. Only to make the mala shinier and shinier, because you count so many mantras. The real refuge is, definite conviction is tolerance, practice of tolerance. That's a true definite conviction. What is the conviction Dharma in? Not just intellectually saying, oh, Buddha saying, wow, wow, wow. But actually doing it. The definite conviction of Dharma, because it's so true and so proper, so reliable all the time. It can't miss a point. So therefore, you have conviction in its counsels, in its list of things we should do. For realizing true selflessness, yeah. When you practice tolerance, you see the emptiness of self. You can't do it on your own. Even tolerance. Forbearance isn't a practice you can do yourself. Maybe you can hit this one, hit this one, hit this one, and then try to practice tolerance. And then you will never succeed. So therefore, there is no truly existing self who is tolerant. There isn't a truly existing patient person if it wasn't for the other. If it wasn't for the other phenomena, other factors. So therefore there is no truly existing patient, tolerant person without the depending on others who are instigators, maybe, who are benefactors, maybe, whatever you may word. First you might say instigators, harm causers, harm doers. Later on you might say friends. Oh, friends, I have little friends at home type of thing. Then later you might say, this is my benefactor. They're my benefactor. Benefactor is a very good word, I think. Benefactors. So you see, there isn't a truly existing self, let alone a tolerant one. It wasn't dependently on many other things. So these are two realizing emptiness of self, emptiness of other things. Yeah. So this is a little bit beyond we talk today, but it will be covered in the perfection of wisdom itself, mainly emptiness. Aspiring the power of transcendent awakened ones, because you are practicing tolerance. Why? You're aspiring the qualities and power of the awakened ones. You find so much comfort in Buddha and the bodhisattvas, so much devotion and respect and love of the teachings. You're aspiring to get those blessings and benefit. And that's why we join our hands, because we aspire to have such skill. We just wish, we prayed, we traveled, we went in search, and we sought, and finally we found. And so, that's exactly what we're doing. It's like a person goes and try to find something in the whole world that's very happy. Likewise, you must see the practicing tolerance as a thing. This is the real gist of all dharmas. And awareness of what to do, what to adopt, what to drop. So what to adopt and what to drop. So dharma is so clear what we should drop that are harmful, like impatience, intolerance, verbally, physically, mentally, or whatever. Physically we shouldn't be aggressive, so we should drop the aggression, harming. Verbally we shouldn't use harsh words, so we should drop those. Mentally we shouldn't harbor ill will and brood anger, so that's a drop. Adopting instead, physically, try to look after, care for the well-being and health and happiness, and speak kindly and gently and courteous, harmonious, respectful language. That's adopting. Mentally, send loving kindness, good wishes, best regard they call it. They always say best regards at the end. Is it a real ritual, or actually we do send best regards? It's nice to see best regards even in the long complaint letter. Best regards. First says dear, such and the last best regard. In between maybe a lot of problems. It makes a difference. See? And as a path of meditation, practicing forbearance is a path of meditation. It is not non-meditation, it is the path of the meditation. It's the actual meditation. The meditation on the cushion is the formality of it. It is the rehearsing of it. It is the formal way of doing it. The actual meditation is the path on which you practice this. You're tolerating cold mornings, early and late night, whatever. That's just formality. Actual practice of tolerance, you have to see the chill of hate and coldness of each other. One must tolerate those and try to thaw them with your warmth, with your goodness. That is really what I call path of meditation. That's actual meditation. And self-education. You could never give yourself any higher education. You can never educate you enough until you have this virtue, until you are able to deeply appreciate the merit of all meritorious practices. That is, that's why we call Buddha the Muni. Muni means who's able to educate, able to awaken himself through the practice of Dharma. As a test of devotion, it shows how devoted we are. We do all kinds of devotional behavior outwardly in kind of social or religious conduct and behavior. But those are just like an etiquette. It's just like We do. We have to do just for the sake of the occasion or place. But real Dharma is not those. Real Dharma is real devotion to the gist of practicing tolerance and helping other by you bearing the shoulder, you shouldering the hardships, responsibilities. And of course, sixfold sacredness of paramita, we talked about that. Need to not go over that. And then, so those are very, very important points. So the first we practice, we don't show aversion when suffering comes, yeah? So that's the first tolerance, not swayed by harms. Second is, we voluntarily accept them, no long. Thirdly, we develop even greater confidence that this is the actual practice. So instead of trying to avoid something, like most people don't want to tolerate distress. If there's distress, they will go not there. They say, don't go there, there's distress. Avoiding distress, It's not a bodhisattva wouldn't avoid distress, Bodhisattvas thrive on distress. Bodhisattvas can mature within the deep distress. In comfort, nobody grows. In distress, it may challenge someone. So therefore, it is very, very important, You really develop confidence in the Dharma. Previously, maybe intellectual, maybe whatever thing is, but now gut feeling, and from the gut you see it's so obviously true. And even if all the Buddhas assemble and talk on the topic, they reiterate this very thing. And then when you hear that, then you will know, that is what we need to do. So you develop definite conviction in the karma, conviction in the triple gem, finding refuge in it and practicing of it, and importance of bodhicitta, importance of understanding cause and effect, importance of generous to each other, and so on. So these are definite conviction. So then, next point is a little bit easier because we have gone through this before, how to train to attain perfection. Perfection means Shanti Paramita. Those three we practice is only Shanti, not Paramita. Paramita has to be, means this transcendental means you have to transcend these attachments. If we practice all the above, but if we have one of the seven attachment is not quite transcendental. So, for instance, people still attached to anger. Some people are still angry at something and they wouldn't let go. So attachment to anger, of course, would not allow us to transcend the anger. So therefore, that's the first one. Second is being attached to postponing tolerance. You wanted to practice forbearance or tolerance, but not here. I'll practice on Sunday or full moon or next month or when I get older. When I get less stress, I'll practice tolerance. But today I'm so stressed, I just have to. So attachment to delaying tactics, delaying tactics. We were talking about that in the tolerance, practice generosity. I was thinking I'll give later, and not today. Like that, instead of practicing forbearance there and then, you will do it later. Attachment to later. It's laziness. Yeah, being attached to being satisfied with minor patience. Saying, I have already practiced patience with this. This so many times, how many more I should practice? Almost you put a bar on that as if going to be a big criminal practicing too much tolerance. As if we have practiced so much tolerance that the world will not accommodate. So putting a bar on good things is so inauspicious. So we shouldn't be counting the beans of tolerance. That's what it is, really. Each time we practice tolerance, we should think, by the multitude of causes and conditions, that is not me. I was able to practice a little tolerance. May the merit of this, transcend all egos like mine. then you will not be, thinking attached to your practice. Being attached to pride, respect, and honor in this life. Yeah, people are practicing tolerance so that people will respect you. You will gain honor. And so most people will do this. Don't be surprised. And then later on they realize, oh, that is the poison. That is poison you thought wasn't recognizable. Then you realize worldly dharma, worldly concern, one is actually practice tolerance for preservation of ego, so that you will be respected, you will be loved, or that like that. If that is the intention, it is the attachment to it. Attachment to that, this pride and respect and gain and honor, which most people say, don't you feel ashamed, doing this? Because it's so-called preserving the ego. There is no ego to be preserved. That's the whole thing. The whole idea is to transcend ego through tolerance, not to boost ego through tolerance. So that's a hard one, isn't it? Most people really practice tolerance so that your mother loves you, or a friend likes you, or people think you're great and you also feel great. Of course you're allowed to feel great on your own, but when you're starting to do that in order to contract and attract respect, if that's the intention, then it becomes a big attachment. Being attached rewards in being liked, and also it also talks about when being attached to rewards in the future lives. Teaching on tolerance talks about benefit in future lives, for instance. It's good for beginners. You have to entice them somehow. Then later on, of course, you can introduce chocolate to somebody, but later on you realize, it's too much is not good. It's good to be liked by others, but it's even better that you're not attached to it. So if you're attached, once you start getting attached to the tolerance and the virtue of it, and then people liking of it, that's a really subtle hindrance to recognize. Being attached to impatience, of course, that's the obvious one. And then being attached to distraction, to lower vehicle, and conceptual grasping. Conceptual grasping is, I'm so patient. I'm the one who have to be patient. The one is grasping to the I, as I is the one who practices tolerance. Or saying, this tolerance, such a virtue, this is amazing. And then you think that the tolerance is truly existing virtue. No, even tolerance does not exist as a virtue on its own. It depends on subject and object and the various other causes. So even the tolerance itself is not an inherently existing virtue, which means we don't become attached to our tolerance. So try to avoid the three conceptual trappings. Object is inherently existing, subject is inherently existing, and the doing is inherently existing. No, all of them are interdependently originated. And then meditate on the lack of, I didn't practice any tolerance. No, I didn't. It was because of the teachings of the Buddha that gave this culture to me so that I practice. Even the Buddha gave me teachings, I have this, but if I don't meet the circumstances, I will not practice them. But many people meet the circumstances, but they never practice. That's because they don't have Dharma. But people have Dharma, but they're still not practicing. They haven't got the actual person actually doing the Dharma. So just like that, unless all the three and many other causes and conditions present, and there is nothing that is truly existing. So therefore, conceptual grasping is, I did this. The Mahayana teaching on PARAMITA, that's the only Dharma type thing. Even the Mahayana teachings, whole put in golden letters and beautiful thing, you still lift the paper, there's still no tolerance. So it's not the teaching that actually is inherently existing. So must meditate. In the Heart Sutra say, there's no path, It doesn't mean there is no path. It means there is no path that inherently existing without a passenger. So unless there is a traveler, you can't have a road. So therefore there is no inherently existing path. There is no path, there is no result, there is no gain, no loss. It isn't denial that there is But it's denial that is not inherently existing, even the path, let alone the person and the action. But with all the three factors together, it's not independently existing. It's an interdependent. So meditate on that. After end of each practice, tolerance, even in half an hour or half later, you think of the little practice you did, you feel, wow, I did that, didn't I? Wow, that's good. Don't get attached to it. Don't get straight away meditate on the illusoriness of the tolerance you practice. That it too is not truly existing. That is the perfection of tolerance, Shanti Paramita. Yeah? No conceptual grasping. An illusion. Think of yourself as illusion. Tolerance is illusion. Suffering is even more as illusion. So, did you accept any suffering? No, except illusory ones. Did you practice tolerance with any suffering? No, except illusory ones. Did you practice any tolerance? Yes, I did, except illusory ones. So that is the transcendental wisdom, perfection of wisdom of Shanti Paramita. Not that people don't practice tolerance. Everybody practices tolerance on various reasons, various worldly level, but they're all tainted by the graspings. People are resentful. They practice 10 years or 20 years of being kind, tolerant, and now they had enough. They got burned out. They have nervous breakdown. They go because they're still attached. I did this so many years, and now that kind of momentarily, day after day, after a couple of hours, each time you got to meditate on the illusoriness of what you did and the thing, and then you are practicing Shanti Paramita. Of course, then you attain the qualities, which is actually opposite to all the seven attachments you practiced. Then the qualities, the benefit, and the realization, and liberation, and the sweetness, and the Dharma that you actually taste. The benefit of tolerance is that it brings some hope. Even Buddha's enlightenment, third bodhisattva bhumi is not achievable unless you practice tolerance. So all the qualities of Buddha that we bow down is not because he was a prince, not because he was wealthy, not because he climbed mountains, not because he went solo yacht around the world. No, because he practiced tolerance for the sake of propagating the Dharma, realizing through meditation and study and practice and discipline. Everything, all the virtues people have, like the Buddha, down through all the successors till today, you can see the diligence, you can see the tolerance. They have hardships, but they are never minding the problems. They're accepting the hardships. It's not as though do periodically, you feel like, consistent, deep tolerant. Never mind the awkwardness, repetitiveness, whatever it is, you don't mind that. So benefit of that can create the continuity of the stream of the Dharma to flow in our life. If we practice these teachings on regular, you can see your life is completely supported by the Dharma. Therefore, we feel supported. Therefore, we feel like we have refuge. And there's very less likelihood of us resorting to aggression, impatience, and retaliation, and so on. It's very likely that we can contain them. And that is what is so important. Shanti Paramita, which is the third paramita. And if you look back with the Dana Paramita, which is giving, with the Shila Paramita, which is the discipline, you can now see these three, how they all has to, if each one of them has two of the other, and so on, then you can see how all the paramitas have paramitas of paramitas. They say altogether, 6 paramitas become 36 paramitas. So, but it's not one thing you do, that is one, the others 5 doesn't happen. when you understand, when you have the paramita.
So we'll conclude here. Thank you for your tolerance. Listening every week. Never mind the call, never mind the journey, never mind the driving, never mind the tiredness. It's all an illusion, okay? So we do the dedication merits of this listening and explaining. By the merit of this, may I attain the state of omniscience, defeat evil enemies and defilements. May I liberate all sentient beings from the samsara ocean, turbulent waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. By listening to the excellent and precious Mahayana teaching, whatever boundless merit I acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stainless vessels to retain the excellent and precious Mahayana teaching. Chanjo Zemjo Rinpoche, Madhya Bana Jejoje, Yaba Nyamba Mebaya, Kone Gondam Bewajo. May the supreme and precious bodhisattva take birth, we have not done so. Where head is reborn, may it increase abundantly without degeneration. Thank you, everyone.